Alrighty, here are the answers for Tuesday's starters. If you'll remember, last week we talked about the percent proportion, and we talked about the fact that the percent proportion is the part over the whole, and that's going to equal your percent over 100. And we had some steps to solve. The first step was to put the 100 where it belongs. The second step is to look for a percent sign. And then the third thing is to look for the whole or the out of. And we were looking for that word of in these problems so that we could find the whole thing. So on number one, we're always going to be setting up the percent proportion. So we use our two fraction bars, and then we're putting in the 100 down at the bottom right. We're looking for a percent sign or for a percent in the problem. Like this one, the percent sign is here. And so this is 30%. Whatever that percent is, it goes over the 100. Because 30% as a fraction is equal to 30 over 100, that's what the right side of the proportion is. Then I'm going to look, then I'm going to look for the word of, because that tells me out of, and that's giving me the whole thing. So in this problem, it says of 60, which means out of 60, which means 60 is the whole thing. So that's going where the whole goes, here on the bottom left. And that means that I'm actually looking for the part that's 30%. Once I've got my proportion written, I cross multiply 60 times 30 is 1800. And then 100 times x is going to give me that 100x. Those two things have to be equal. So 100 times some number has to equal 1800. And if you don't know what that is, we're just dividing by 100. And we've got that x is equal to 18. So that means 18 is 30% of 60. On number two, we are setting up our proportion. We're putting the 100 on the bottom right. We're looking for a percent sign or the word percent, and this says what percent? If it says what percent, that means that's the thing that we don't know. So that's where the x goes, over 100. So our percent is the thing that's unknown. Then we're looking for the word of, and that means out of. That out of 75 means 75 is the whole thing, so it's going on the bottom. And that leaves my 25 as my part. Again, I'm going to cross multiply. I have 100 times 25 is 2500. 75 times x is 75x. Those two things have to be equal, because remember, when we cross multiply, things have to be equal. So to get the answer, I've got 2500 and that equals 75x. If I split that equation, I'm dividing by 75 so that I get that x by itself, and it's just 1x. And when I divide on this one and I do 2,500 divided by 75, I get this big, long decimal. Sorry, that's kind of hard to see. So I get 33.33333. So I'm going to say that that's 33.3. And then I put this repeating line over that 3, which means that that 3 just keeps repeating on and on. 75 divided by 75 is just 1x. So my 1x is going to be 33 and a repeating 3%. And that's actually equal to 33 and 1/3%. That looks like an 8. That's supposed to be a 3. 33 and 1/3%. All right, then we've got the next one. We have 42 is 105% of what number? So we're setting that up. We put our 100 here. We're looking for a percent sign or for the percent in the problem. And in this one, it says that it's 105%. So we put that number over 100 because 105 over 100 is equal to 105%. Then we look for the word of, and this means out of, and it says out of what number? Which means we do not know what the whole thing is. So that's where our X is going. We're trying to find the whole. And then we've got 42 on the top. Then we cross multiply. 42 times 100 is 4,200. And 105 times X is 105X. Those two things have to be equal when we cross multiply. In order to figure out 105 times something to get 4,200, we set those two equal to each other. We split that equation. We're going to divide by 105. And we have 4,200 divided by 105, and that's equal to 40. And then 105 divided by 105 is just 1x. So in this problem, 40 is my whole, and it's smaller than my part because my percent is over 100. So if your percent's over 100, then your part is going to be bigger than the whole. All right, the next one. What number is 80% of 120? So we set up our proportion. We put our 100. We are looking for the percent sign in the problem. And it's 80%. So I put the 80 over the 100 because that is 80%. I look for the word of and look for the number that's after that. That means out of 120, which means 120 is my whole. And then I'm looking for that part. I cross multiply. 120 times 80 is 9,600. And 100 times x is 100x. Those two things have to be equal. So when I'm doing that problem, I have to figure out 100 times what number is equal to 9,600. If you don't know that, we're just dividing by 100 on both sides. And 9,600 divided by 100 is 96. and then 100 divided by 100 is just 1x. So 96 is 80% of 120. All right, then we're going into writing as fractions and percent. So we have the decimal 45 hundredths. When we want to write that as a percent, we take that 45 hundredths. To change a decimal to a percent, we move that decimal place 2 places to the right. So now we have 45 with the decimal point at the end, and you can either put it there or not, and then we add a percent sign. So 45 hundredths is 45%, and then 45% written as a fraction, we just take the 45 and we put it over 100. We've got 108% written as a decimal and then written as a fraction. So we take the 108%. In order to change that to a decimal, we remove the percent sign. If there is no decimal point, it means it's right there. We move that decimal point 2 places back so that it's between the 1 and the 0. So 1 8/100 is the way we write that as a decimal. And then as a fraction, it's just 108 over 100.